Hello, everybody. Welcome to the URM podcast. Our guest today is a good friend of the podcast, has been on multiple times, Mr. Dave Otero. I would call him a household name in metal production. At this point, you know him for work with Shadow of Intent, Cattle Decapitation, Archspire. You know, the list goes on. Aborted, Despised Icon. Like, I can just, go on and go on and go on. It's just, I'm reading right now. Vitriol, the Zenith Passage, just sick band after sick band after sick band after sick band. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the very best in metal. And he kind of just figured out his own sound. I would describe it as modern, but natural, polished, yet real. So, and he can do anything from the nastiest black metal to the techiest death metal to radio metal. And it all sounds great. He's a great guy. His Nail the Mix episodes have been some of the best. We've had him at the URM Summit, and his presentations have been some of the best. All around, great guy. Dave Otero. Here goes. Dave, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I feel like we were just talking.
Well, we literally were talking right before we started the podcast, but
true. But I mean, even
way.
before that.
Oh yeah. Well, we talk a lot. We're good. We're buds. We're friends.
Yeah, we shot some video. Was that a week ago or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
or a month
or 2
ago.
Weeks ago. No, it couldn't have been that long. But yeah, probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so you might not agree with this because you're kind of humble, but I want to get your thoughts. Your profile's gone up a lot in the past few years, which I think is awesome. I've always thought it was a matter of time, but I kind of noticed that in the past few years, it's gone from Otero, the sick underground dude, to just Otero, one of the names in the running for sick bands, underground or not. Still get the underground cred, but now some legit big bands and long waiting periods to work with you. You know, things are going well, and from my vantage point, it seems like the corner. I mean, you've been slowly building it over 2 decades, but I feel like that corner got turned in the past 5 years, more like in the past 4 years or 3.
Yeah, I'd probably say I see the same thing. It's cool to hear you say that and to sort of see that. Feels nice. I try and be humble, but at the same time, this is obviously I've been working my entire life to position myself in a point in the industry where I'm kind of feel like a go-to guy. So I will take that graciously and very appreciative of it. I honestly think it's probably more longevity than anything. And I mean, I've gotten better at my craft, and the bands that I've worked with for longer periods of time have also risen up the ranks of their own perspective ladders. So kind of rising tides raises all ships. That's
boats all lift.
Yeah, boats all lift.
Tiding rises, lift boats all lift.
I think that's it. You got it. Yeah.
How long have you been making a living at it?
For a long time, actually. Since I was 18. And I mean, and that was a meager living for a while there, but it doesn't take
a living, but that's still
ton.
A living.
Yeah, you're paying rent on an apartment or whatever, and have a shitty car that's paid off. That's easier to do in the younger years of one's life.
And in 2003.
And in 2003, yeah. When Yeah, speaking of that, it would probably be more difficult to do it now. I feel a little bit for the kids coming up now. Things are just like more expensive in general, and the pay for audio services hasn't quite kept up with inflation. It's just become a
Dude,
bit watered down.
I had this loft apartment in Atlanta, right across the street from the Masquerade, and like the top floor of a building, and it was like concrete floors and like picture windows. It was like $600 a month. That's so unheard
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
And so it was that and like $40 for internet.
Yeah.
And so yeah, all I had to do was book one weekend a month with the studio, and I was fine.
Yeah. I mean, and I started by like working a lot and just not charging that much. And that's how I stayed busy and got practice is I think when I started, I was like charging by the hour like everyone. It was like $20 an hour or something like that, which at the time I was like, felt like I was fucking rolling in it if I could stay busy because
Yeah,
it's a lot of
totally.
money to someone with no family and like not a lot of things to pay for. Um, and it was fun. It was a great gig. And I remember back like in those days, maybe like 15 years ago, because we're like, what am I, 43 now? And I started
Hmm.
when I was 18. So that's like 25 years of doing this essentially full time. Um, like I've had like a handful of other jobs, like bussing tables and shit. Like I would be kind of fucked if as soon as AI figures out how to do my job as well as I am, as I do, then hopefully I'll be old enough to retire
So,
because I don't have many other skills. This is my only job experience.
hey, everybody. Want to take a quick break from this episode to talk to you about URM Academy. Now, so if you're new here, URM Academy is the best online school for metal and rock producers and musicians. When you join, you get a whole access to a range of content. There's Nail the Mix, which I'm guessing most of you know, and that's where we bring on a different artist and a different mixer every month to walk through a mix and give you the raw multi-tracks. And we've had on mixers like Will Putney, Jens Bogren, Tom Lord Algae, with artists like Bring Me the Horizon, Meshuggah, Periphery, Opeth, even Nickelback, and tons more. If it's under the heavy music umbrella, as I like to call it, we cover it. You also get our Mix Lab tutorials, which are little bite-size tutorials about very specific topics. We have over 100 of those now. So like if you don't have the time for a Nail the Mix session or an entire course, you just want to find one tidbit of info to help solve a problem, that's what Mix Labs are for. We also have exclusive members only Facebook and Discord groups where you can make friends with and talk to thousands of people from all over the world who do the exact same thing as you. And what's super awesome about our community is that it's troll free. We kick trolls out. It's like an oasis online. And also our instructors are part of the community and they interact with everybody. So, you can not only make friends, but you can, I guess, socialize and learn from the best. Also, we have URM Enhanced, which is our more advanced membership tier. The main focus of that is our Fast Track library, which are some very, very, very detailed courses on everything from editing drums to post-production effects, automation, creating impulse responses, working with low-tuned guitars, and more. We have over 70 of these. It's actually insane how deep and comprehensive the fast tracks are. And when you join Nail the Mix or URM Enhanced, you also get access to Riff Hard, our online school for metal guitarists with hundreds of lessons from artists such as Animals as Leaders, Spirit Box, Archspire, Jason Richardson, and many more. So go to urm.academy. Let's get back into this episode. When did it turn a corner to where, even if it wasn't kind of like it is now, but you were able to reliably know that you're going to be able to have at least a normal life from it? Maybe not like top producer spot kind of thing, but where it was moving along, I guess, consistently with some stability.
Yeah, I mean, it's never fully stable, I would say. But like now, maybe in that same time period that you kind of brought up in the last like 4 years, it's probably when I have first felt like true security. It's like I'm always going to be able to record someone. Before that, I would have periods for sure where I'm booked out for 6 months, 8 months, but then the cyclical nature of things, like I would still have like a worrying period or, um, I've been doing this long enough to go through a few like economic downturns in the country, and like I was like, "Oh, I'll be fine," and then those hit, and I'm like, "Ugh, okay, so like things get a little worrisome. And at this point, I do have like a, a family and kid and a building and house and like, you know, responsibilities as a typical adult do. So the need for security rises compared to how it was when I was, 18 or whatever. Um, so I think maybe just in the last few years, honestly, I feel like fairly certain that I should be good. But there's always stuff right around the corner. Like I don't want to get too comfortable and rest on my laurels.
So 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years it took
Yeah.
of like being a little nervous.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that's good for people to hear. Um, I like that you did it. You did it staying true to what you're into. Mostly. I know there's a few bands that are questionable. I'm just kidding. No, like you did it staying true to what you're into, which I think is great, because a lot of people will say things like there's no money in metal. You're asking to not get work if you stick to the extreme stuff. And I know you don't just do the extreme stuff, but you're super well known for the extreme stuff. And I've always thought that that's bullshit, that there's plenty of money in metal. It's kind of cowardly to leave it if that's what you really want to do, in my opinion, because there's no guarantees in any genre. There might be some upward potential in some genres that are greater. It's like greater upward potential than metal, but that doesn't mean you're going to do better than you would. Like I think you're going to do best in what you're passionate enough about to do for 20 years straight in insecurity.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, well, maybe there are forms of at least having music with higher commercial potential, that could potentially there could be more money in, but that's not like that's not where my ears lean. So I think you're better off just like sticking with what you're good at and what you could crush and where you have the ear, I mean, I wouldn't have even really known. It's not like I ever had an opportunity. They're like, "Hey, Taylor Swift wants you to do 2 songs," and I was like, "Nah, bro, blast beats only. Fuck that." It's not like that opportunity ever came up. And like
She's got blast beats at 260 in her new song.
Hell yeah. Well, we're gonna have to bump those up. 260 is not gonna sell any records.
No.
But I probably would have taken opportunities had they arisen, if only because it would be fun and because it's good to like not pigeonhole yourself. Even within the like underground extreme stuff that I have kind of made my bed in, I try and mix it up. I do things on the like very produced side, and I have unfortunately not quite as much anymore just because the budgets tend to not support it. But I've done a lot of stuff that's like a lot more raw and very limited editing, and it's supposed to feel very oppressive and raw and human. I've done slow stuff on Khemmis and on the fast shit, obviously, that probably most people know me for, Archspire, Cattle, that type of thing. Done commercial stuff, like at least bridging on the commercial stuff like Tetrarch. But even them, like they come to me because they want to live in that world, but also like have like a harder, heavier edge. So I can kind of give them a little bit of that like aggression that is sometimes missing on the more commercial side, although that's kind of like a lot of bands are moving in that direction, which is cool.
One thing I've
So
noticed with you that I think is, sorry to cut you off, but
no,
I'm going to anyways.
do it.
The thing I think that's really important with the producer is having good taste, and you have turned me on to several bands that then went on to get a lot bigger, and that I think are legitimately great, like Archspire and Leprous. And so I think your tastes are in the right place, which I think is the part of this whole thing that you can't learn from somebody else. Like, there's no amount of listening to a podcast or watching Nail the Mix or whatever that's going to give you good taste, but
Yeah.
you can learn to develop it to some degree, I think. And it's really, really important, because I think you kind of, it's one of those things where nobody can tell you how to do that, but it's a real thing. And if you develop it, that helps guide you in the decisions you make, as far as like when you're producing, when you're mixing, but then also who you're going to work with, and how much energy should you put into it? What kind of energy should you put into it? I think your taste guides all of that. And I think that's one of the most important things about being a good producer, is having good taste.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like you said, it's kind of impossible to learn that from a book or a video or something. But the more time you spend in music and just thinking about music, the more you just start to build this sense of recognizing what's special in music, or about a band, or about a particular musician. And it sounds a little cliche, like when people say like, they just got that it factor, or like they just have that special thing, but it is like absolutely a thing that I have like learned to somewhat detect, I guess, with either bands that I'm working with or bands that I hear. And it's this combination of talent and originality. Like that's kind of like the golden egg in all forms of entertainment, is something that's like good and new, feels kind of fresh in some way. And some bands, some people have it right away. Some people develop it as like, like Cattle, I would say, is a band that had been around a long time and then finally developed this thing that is like very much them and very special, that no one can quite touch. And you can say that about almost like any like long running successful band. It kind of it's that thing that just can't easily be reproduced, and it's like, I don't know, Lepers is a good case too. It's like a combination of all those people, and Einar's voice and Bar's drumming, like they're both in themselves like amazing musicians, but it's a combo of all that stuff and how they put it together that makes it such a unique listening experience and gives them that like it factor. Like, okay, these guys have a thing. Like, it might not be for everyone. In fact, it's definitely not for everyone, but it is strong enough, tied to some people's taste, that they'll continue to rise. Like, I mean, I just saw them a few days ago, and every time, they're on that trajectory. Every time I see them, the production's better, they're tighter, they're more comfortable, the whole package is better, the sound's better, the venues get bigger. And it's working with bands like that too. It's like it's amazing to just like watch that progression and kind of ride it with them.
They're the next Opeth if they don't fuck up.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably good.
Commit some crimes,
I would,
develop some horrific drug habits or something. Like, I think they're on the path to be that band for prog.
Yeah, they can be a little more polarizing than Opeth, although people have super strong opinions on Opeth these days, I guess. Speaking of that, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen any of the interviews with Michael. That's his name, right?
Yep.
Talking, he's like so annoyed that people are making a big deal about him screaming again. It's like it's like the contention he has for that death metal vocals essentially is so funny to me. I'm pretty surprised they did it again. And I've every time I see him talk about it, I feel like he regrets it, because he's like, it's just so annoyed that people only care about the growls. He's great at it. Sounds amazing.
He is great at it. I remember was driving him somewhere once a long time ago. It was when they were on Sounds of the Underground. So it was a long time ago. And we were talking about each other's music and being non-standard. And he told me he told me that he knows that people kind of hate them for not doing standard death metal when they could do it just fine, but that's not what he's interested in. And if he's going to lose a bunch of fans that want them to just do death metal the whole time, well, they can just fuck right off, basically. Yeah. Their whole thing is they don't want to do standard death metal.
Yeah. Well, they're not, I mean, I guess this new one is a little more death metal. I think I've only heard 2 tracks, but they've always kind of done their own thing. And honestly, like when they made that switch, it was pretty ballsy because they had just kind of crested into this new realm of like, okay, wow, you could play like big venues now, and a lot of eyes, and you're seen as these like gods of this scene. And then they were like, cool, well, we're going to change everything about our band now, pretty much. Like, obviously the DNA is still there and you could see it happening, but they made a very hard shift with their production styles, stopped growling like entirely, which it was like, it's still at that point, it was primarily death metal.
Mm-hmm.
And they just did it.
It's ballsy.
Continue to grow. It's super ballsy.
It's interesting to me when a band can do that and get away with it, and other times when a band tries to take that left turn and just doesn't get away with it.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered what the difference is. And I think with Opeth, it does seem organic because like they did put out that one All Cleans record before.
Yep.
And their cleans are so good, always been so good, that you could always imagine a universe where they were a classic rock band. Like they probably are a classic rock band in like a parallel universe. So it was a ballsy move, but it wasn't like incongruent with their identity as an artist. I think when bands do something that's incongruent with their identity as an artist, feels forced or something, or they take a left turn into something they kind of suck at, I think that's when it backfires most of the time.
It felt honest, and I think that's what it was. It truthfully was honest. And taking it back to like the bands I choose to work with, I think that's one thing I appreciate about the more extreme, potentially underground side of things. It's like that, like doing something for like non-honest reasons, like is just never even considered. Like, why would you ever like compromise on your music to like try and get more fans? Like that kind of, those conversations don't happen in the type of stuff that I work on typically. And occasionally I'll dip my toe into these more commercial worlds, and all of a sudden a lot of the decisions are more about like, well, how are the fans going to react to this? Or like, how is this going to position us in the market? And like, while it's fine to be aware of those things, to like make that your guiding light, delivering what is supposed to be art, just like, it kind of ruins it for me. And then like, at the end of the day, I'm supposed to be part of the creative team, on these projects. And if it feels like the primary goal is not coming from like an honest place, I kind of just start to check out. It's just like, everyone wants to be successful and make money, but I do fine. Like I have enough money. Of course, if you're going to hand me more, I'll take it, but that's not my main goal here. It's to be comfortable and then to like make stuff that's really fun for me to make and work with people who are like excited about the same things I'm excited about. And most of that needs to start from like an honest place. And I'm not saying that you have to, like, some producers I honestly think take it too far and like, don't consider the fan opinion at all. But it just feels bad for me to be making decisions based on what people think might be the most commercially viable choice. It's gross.
I was talking about this whole authenticity thing with Ishan, and he said something really interesting. if the reason that Nurgle can get away with doing Behemoth and then posting a story of him doing yoga or some shit, like the polar opposite of his Behemoth getup and vibe is that the whole thing feels congruent, honest, and authentic. So it seems like it would be like, whoa, that's weird, but for some reason it's not, because he's just being himself, and it works. And that's the most important part of it.
I'm sure some people don't like it, and it's kind of like it's talked about as like being. Though. It does not hurt them at all, and he is like super. He's one of the most honest dudes like on the internet. You know, front man. He's kind of very open about stuff, and it seemed like a lot of that kind of like came to the forefront after he like, you know, almost died from cancer, I believe is what happened. So like that could give you some perspective on life. And he's lucky enough to be clearly a smart and talented musician. And then you have like a close call like that, and then you're just like, fuck it. And then he just kind of like dropped the facade, which is interesting because black metal is pretty facade heavy.
Yeah.
But he somehow manages to do both, and it's just not. He just like doesn't give a fuck. Like, when he's on stage, he's performing a show. I don't know. Yeah, he's done a really good job of just like melding both worlds, where they still feel very different but not separate. Which is cool.
Yep, it's the authenticity part. People can smell that, I think.
Yeah.
People in metal smell authenticity or lack thereof.
It's so much more enjoyable to work with an artist that has that as well. Like they're like sure enough of themselves and their artistic output, and some of that comes with maybe not age, but like time in the spotlight, or maybe musical age, I suppose, where you kind of build some confidence and you know what you can do and know that people will like it, I guess. But yeah, it's freeing in a way to just work with like a team or work with artists who like are confident in what they're putting out, and it kind of almost like removes some walls from the creative process.
Yeah, it's funny. Have you ever seen in a movie when they have metalheads in a movie and been like, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
That's not what they're, or punks or something.
Yeah.
And it's clearly whoever runs the wardrobe department and also wrote the script has never actually listened to metal in their life or been around a metal person ever.
Yeah. Well, they watch like, you know, like Heavy Metal Parking Lot from like 80s or from the 80s or something. And they see like super trashed, hammered fans who are like, you know, 2 years into puberty and are just full of piss and vinegar. That's like one side of metal. And, you know, I can get there sometimes. That's fine too. But in, on the behind the scenes and the people creating the art, it's like is very different. And I feel like some of that has changed over the years too. Like we've probably gotten on this conversation before, but like musicians are different now than they were 20, 30 years ago.
They're better.
They're just like they just take it a little more seriously. It's a little harder to like make money to become successful, and it's not even make money, but like get to a point where you can like live off of this even remotely. So you kind of got to be a little more on your game. It can't just be about the rock star facade.
Yeah, because that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
so,
not really.
Out of curiosity, now that your schedule is always packed and you have bands coming to you for, you know, I know that the more successful a mixer becomes, the more that bands come asking for something kind of like what you did with the previous project. That's very normal. So within all that, what do you find what do you still find exciting, and do you still find time to experiment with new things, with new tools, new plugins, new ways of doing things?
Yeah, I kind of have to force it a little more now. I've maybe noticed that over the last like 4 or 5 years. Just because like along with that confidence, like you kind of fall into grooves, you know. And I have like my like workflow has been more established in the last few years than probably it ever has been in my entire life. And you would expect that in some way after doing it for 25 years, but uh I do have to like maybe make myself try new things rather than just like following, you know, what I've done. And that's fine. Like you develop a process that works and then becomes you like mold it as you go. So sometimes it's new tools and sometimes it's just like I'm not super excited about getting started on this mixer, whatever. Let's go plug-in hunting and find something that looks cool and try it out, and maybe that gives me like a spur of motivation. Um, Sometimes it's hearing a new mix, or sometimes it's a request from an artist. Like honestly, that happens a lot too. Which is why the more I've done this, the more I want feedback from artists, especially the ones that I kind of feel like have that it factor that we were talking about. Um, because that's where a lot of like what I consider like my innovation, at least within myself, is spurred from is like a thing that an artist is pushing for, either a sound or an effect or a feel. So
Man, want to know something? Me and Zaretti, Jesse, we
yeah,
talk about feedback as, if you're not good at taking feedback, you're going to really have a hard time in music.
hmm
And
yeah,
a lot of people have a negative, like, mental association with it, but you should try to have a positive association with it, because that's your chance to get better.
yeah,
And, and so we try to always, like, when we're giving each other feedback, to like lean into it, because if you really respect what the other person brings to the table, then there's probably something about what they're telling you that's worth paying attention to, and it'll help you grow. And
yeah.
I have gotten a lot better in the past couple of years at just what I do musically, because of feedback from Krim or feedback from Jesse or whatever about something not good enough. And like I've watched bands write, and I've written with a lot of other people, and so I know that lots of times when someone will say something's not right, there's too much of this thing, or I don't like where this is going, or we need to take it a different direction. If you put a lot of work and a lot of time into it, I've seen people get really fucking mad and have like some pretty explosive fights over that. And not because they disagree with each other, but more because the person is hurt, that,
Yeah.
or like mad, frustrated that they put a lot of work into something, and they have to challenge it, or it's like, what did they do all that work for? Or now they're going to have to go and do that much work all over again. It's usually not because the person brings bad ideas in. And so every once in a while there is a true, like, I just disagree. But I think more often than not, when you hear about creative differences and you see band fights and stuff, it's not because someone's bringing a bad idea. It's because someone doesn't react well to feedback. Bands will not go back to a mixer who made them feel bad for giving mix notes. And I just think that if you're going to work with other people, one of the most important things you could do is get good at taking the feedback, because they'll like working with you, but really, because that's going to be how you really get a lot better, because they're going to give you ideas that are outside of what you would come up with on your own.
For sure. And even some of the stuff that happens during the creative process, as far as like those ideas and like, you know, I'm the one that's got to do the bulk of the work in this situation. So someone is like, hey, let's try this. And in my brain, I'm like, okay, that's like 2 hours of me fucking around. And like, so immediately I'm like, but you know, you got to at least see it through, or start to explore an idea. I try not to like, I never shoot down any ideas in the studio. Like, immediately. Like you at least have to like discuss it, bring some other people into the conversation and stuff like that. There are times when it is just like a case of uh, like I'm like, how are you hearing it like this? This has only maybe happened a few times in my career and one time in the recent past. And it was a struggle because I mean, it was just like the case of me and a collection of artists just wanting just like different things. And they weren't that far off, but I can be pretty particular with like the feel of something I'm working on, be it mix or production or whatever. So when I feel like there's just like an absolute divergence of opinions there, it does get tricky. But in most of those cases, as the mixer, especially, you kind of got to swallow your pride because like this is 2 weeks of your work life and 2 years plus of creative output from the artist that you're working for, and you are working for them or for the label. So you do your best to guide the situation to where you think it needs to be, or at least where it's like going to be palatable for the general audience. But when it comes down to some of those details, it can suck, but you sort of got to like concede in a lot of cases. But yeah, mixed notes and feedback, it's still something that I struggle with because a lot of my like self-worth as an artist or as a producer is tied into like people liking it immediately. So when you are stoked on something and you send it out and it comes back with like a long list of stuff that is pretty far off base from what you envisioned, it
I was about to
sucks.
say,
And,
I
like,
sent you a long list.
well, yeah, but yours
it
were
wasn't
different
off
though.
base.
Yeah, yours were different because they were just like more like small detail type things, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Like I'm like, God damn it, this is gonna take me like 2 hours, and honestly, it didn't. It took me like 20 minutes probably. But you'll see a long list, and that's like a different feeling when you get feedback, and it's like, you realize that where you took it to is like far off from where they were expecting. Sometimes there's an adjustment period. It's like it just varies, but regardless, it feels bad. Like immediately, it feels bad. But then you kind of got to like kill that because it's not helpful for anyone, especially you. And then dig in and try and see things from their perspective. And then, sometimes that's long conversations. Sometimes that's trying some stuff so they can see maybe why you made some of the decisions you made along the way. I know it kind of feels ambiguous talking about these situations.
I can give you an example of how one thing, that happened with Jens, where our song "No Rest, No End," the chorus is pretty catchy, and it's got this layered octave guitar that's also has a synth that doubles one of the octaves, and but he did mix one. And I walked in and heard the chorus, and it sounded like a Euro metal band, the way he had it mixed, like a Nightwish kind of band, like a Euro pop band kind of thing. It was super, like it sounded awesome, super commercial, but it was just wrong for that. And he had turned the synth up way loud and kind of buried the octave affected guitars. And so I kind of showed him an example of a band that did something similar-ish in a part, and then showed him the demo, and he's like, oh, so my version, which I like better, would be the catchy version. Your version would be the sad version. I was like, that's fine. So let's just go with the sad version. And so he did it right. And that's what we went with. He still said that he preferred his version, like his version, like he felt like his version was more commercial or something like that, which I agree. It sounded like one of those bands, like one of those European bands that are huge in Europe and have those like really catchy like European choruses. Which is not us.
I'm just envisioning you in like the full leather outfit.
Yeah, one of those bands that somehow plays arenas in Europe. But like it did take a conversation and just getting him to understand the what it's supposed to feel like. And he was cool about it. Like it was fine that he didn't agree with it. But he didn't argue about it either.
Yeah.
Like he stated he didn't agree with it. He didn't think our vision was bad or anything. He just preferred his, but we still went with ours.
Yeah.
And that was fine. I feel like that's how it should be.
You get that kind of figured out early on enough, and then it kind of like informs like Jens as the mixer or whoever, of like, okay, this is the feel. And then it's just like getting on the same road. You know, I use that analogy a lot. And when I fully produce a band, there's like not really an issue there because we've been creating this record for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We're already all in the same road. We're like literally all in the same tiny car, like in a row, going down a very tiny road. There's no ambiguity as to like where we're headed with the creative process. But when you're just mixing, it takes a bit, and there's some conversation involved. References help as far as like soundscape style stuff. And then sometimes you have to like course correct. So typically if I don't know the artist very well or I haven't worked with a band before, I'll maybe send some mixes a little earlier than I would otherwise just to like test the water. So it's kind of like, you know, you want to like just throw a teaser out there and you know, preface it by saying like, okay, hey, well, this is not anywhere near a finished mix, but what do you think? What are you liking? What are you not liking? And that helps you course correct before you like go 80 miles in the wrong direction. Versus if it's a band I've done before or an album I produced, or even like artists that I know, or people that I know well, I'll wait a little longer and I'll get some automation in there and level out some vocals and get some of the smaller details in the right place. And then I'll still like be a little nervous when I ship it out and I send that Dropbox link and send a few sentences like, you know, like, hey, this is where it's at. What do you think? But I'm more confident that like, okay, I know what they want. I know where to take this, and I'd rather get it to something that feels pretty finished, and then they're just going to like it even more, you know? Like I just sent out a mix yesterday that I had gotten pretty far, like essentially fully. I'm doing a whole record for this band, but I've like fully mixed one song, automation, delay throws, tucked all the stuff into all the little spots. And there's some danger there because you could be doing work that is worthless. If you make substantial changes to the mix, then all of a sudden a lot of the automation is not going to be valid anymore. You could be backtracking quite a bit. But you ship it out, and this band's in Europe, so that's like, you know, I send it when I'm done in the studio at like 7 or 8 at night, and I'll get feedback when I'm asleep. So you kind of like wake up and you like peek at your phone, and
It's
like
dangerous.
This case it worked out. So they loved it, and we're like on the right path. I'm like, cool, nailed it. But yeah, you got to treat those situations a little bit differently, and then you know, roll with the punches when they inevitably come in.
Yeah. Have you ever been fired off a mix?
One time, yep.
What happened?
It was a band who the singer lives in Colorado and was present for the mix, and he is a very smart dude, accomplished in his field. He's like a professional who deals in like facilitating communication. So he came in very confident. I am going to speak for the whole band. I'm going to I'll be the one.
I will facilitate
translating
communication.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, cool. So we talked about stuff. He was present for a lot of the mixing. We went for this vibe. This is kind of like a band that had been around for a long time, but hadn't done anything in a while. So trying not to name names here, but they had an established sound, but hadn't really been present in the scene. And what we did was like push them towards something different from their history that was very aggressive and that I was into. And then the guy I was here mixing was like very into. I mean, I still remember him sending, we finally let some of the other guys hear some of the stuff that we were stoked on. And he was talking about it redefining like extreme music sounds and stuff like that. Well, they fucking hated it. Like hated it. And we had taken it really far. We had gone like too far. And I didn't know these other guys at all. And it was like we was kept too separate. So this was a learning lesson for me and for him. Um, but in the end, like it had gotten so far, and the amount of time that we had left planned in the budget was just not there. And it would have involved like almost starting over. So we tried to, I
Yeah.
tried to make some concessions, work with what I had. And it finally just came down to the like, this is not what we want. And they took it to another dude who gave them like a very old school American death metal sound. It was very different from what we had gone for, which was like kind of this more like exploding out of the speaker, like nails type of a sound, chainsaw guitars, you know?
I'm into that.
I thought it sounded sick.
I would have probably preferred that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like some people would have, but I also
But
I
hey,
see their point that it didn't feel honest and it didn't represent them. And it's not what they liked. And
fair
like
enough.
the singer, the dude who he was like he kind of stays a little more current. So he's like, oh hell yeah, this new album, this is like when like the previous Nails album had come out. It was like everyone was really into it, and the sound was a big part of that. Those guys don't listen to that shit. They were still listening to like the first two Cannibal Corpse records, you know? It's like, so it just felt so foreign to them. And it was a lesson for me. Like, I don't give a shit how good you are at, you know, or you think you are at speaking for the rest of your band. Won't do that again. Like everyone has to be involved. And specifically in a case like that, where I don't know the guys, like earlier the better, so we can kind of like check progress as we go along, you know. So that situation changes for every band. You really got to be able to read the room, read the artists. Like older dudes are going to be more particular. That's like kind of how it is. Like the older a group of artists are, like the more diverse by nature their tastes will be, the more spread out across the world, you know. So occasionally I'll mix projects where it's like I have to make, you know, 5 artists happy with their sound and their performances, but somehow put that all together. And 2 guys are from the Bay Area thrash scene. 1 guy's from Denmark. The bass player is from Sweden, and they all have their own little segment they're coming from and expect to hear. And you gotta get like see into the future and decide, okay, how do I tackle this? Like, I need to make sure I'm satisfied with it. It's got my name on it too. But now I have these like 5 very diverse opinions and histories that I have to cater to as well. So, some learning lessons. I've had a few projects where, you know, those communication skills are leveled up after the end, but through pain and blood and sweat and tears.
Communications expert, huh?
Yeah, it's me.
Well, I
Tom's
just meant
expert.
that vocalist. The
Oh,
thing, man, involving people too late. That's I've learned that the hard way too. Bring them in as early as is reasonable.
Yeah.
That's why actually when you sent the first mix, I asked you if it's ready for notes or ready for me to show them.
Yeah.
Just because you don't want to bring like people not liking something when it's not ready for feedback. So you got to know when a good time is. But in my opinion, the earliest possible is good. The earliest you can bring everybody in, the better.
For singles, it's easier, you know, because like both of the songs I've done for Doth Now have been singles, which you have a little more flexibility. It's like things move faster.
Yep.
If I make a misstep on the guitar tone, like, okay, I have to reamp 1 song, not 12 songs, you know. So it makes it a little easier to move quick, and you don't have to consider like, okay, how is this work going to spread out across the whole record? Things just become more complicated. But working with you is different because you just have more perspective on. I mean, even other people who do mixing and mastering, like you have the most perspective that has ever been had in human history because of like. Honestly, because of the URM stuff, because you've been around it for so long and you've talked to so many people, you've worked with a lot of like, aside from URM, even with Doth, you've worked with a lot of different highly regarded engineers and seeing their workflows and seeing how they prefer to communicate. So you have a thoughtfulness that others don't, as far as like what you just said, mentioning like, okay, so where are we at in the process? Should I send this to those guys? Are you just trying to like test it with me first? And then we can kind of speak plainly about that type of stuff. But with most other artists, it's my job to handle all of that without them even really realizing that that's a consideration. Like I
Makes
have
sense.
to
It makes
preface
sense.
that or decide when to share things and when not to share things. And it really does change every project. And I'm like, I was thinking about this yesterday, literally, because I sent that mix out. I've been working on this mix for a week and a half, and they had heard nothing. So that's a long time. Someone's like, hey, we're paying this dude. What the fuck is happening? Um, in this case, I just felt like I needed to take it further. But man, you're nervous. Like I'm still nervous, 25 years in when I send that first mix out, like, oh God, I hope they don't hate this because it could just like totally just like fuck my entire next week. Um, but they didn't. It worked out this time. Doesn't always.
I think that the reason that a lot of people procrastinate stuff with mixing is because of that fear of sending stuff to people.
Yeah.
Actually, that's one of the things that we tried to combat with Nail the Mix, with the mix poll and all that, because obviously odds are stacked against you if you enter.
Yeah.
Like most people will not win. It's just impossible. Like 500 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 odds. Like that's not, it's not, you're probably not going to win just because of the numbers involved. But that doesn't matter. The fact of actually finishing things, even before you think they're perfect, just finishing things and getting them done and just being zen about it, like what will happen, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Nail the Mix it's trying to simulate a situation where you're paid for a task, So like you got to like deliver. Things have to be delivered and there are a lot of people in the creative space, not just audio, that aren't reliable enough. That's like a major thing that is lacking in a lot of creatives, and it's like comes from an honest place of them not wanting to release something they're not fully satisfied with. Like I understand that, but it's still a business. When you're dealing with labels, they have timelines and like things need to get done. So learning how to push through some of those fears and insecurities and just like work on stuff. And okay, so you get some feedback back and some changes need to be made. Just get on it and then get it back to them like ASAP, so the train can keep chugging along down the tracks, and then everyone feels like they're being heard and the project will be completed in a reasonable fashion. Like blowing through timelines and budgets is like the first thing you can do, even as a talented mix engineer or producer, to like get yourself blacklisted by people who are trying to run businesses around art. So it's a tricky
Have
thing.
you ever been fully satisfied with something?
I've come really close, but no, probably not. Like there's always, and even if sometimes it's like, oh man, the artist just like wanted to just push things a little bit too far in this direction, and that bums me out, Or yeah, I think that it's a terrible feeling, but also like maybe a superpower that probably most successful artists have, and that's what like drives them to get better and has been part of what has taken them to where they are. Is that inability to feel fully satisfied with any kind of creative output, because then you
Yeah.
would just stop, right?
Yeah. It's an unreasonable and kind of counterproductive expectation to want to be fully satisfied. But, Dave, I think it's a good place to end the episode. I want to thank you for taking the time to chill and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, sir. You as well. Thanks for having me on yet again.
Anytime.